This video is to demonstrate the before the CO2 cleaning on this Rolls-Royce Phantom 1. So here we have the firewall. The engine. Transmission. Inside of the firewall. The dashboard is out, as you can see that. And nearly all of the wiring is also out. So now what had prompted this was the car is in for a rewiring. It had all its original wiring, and any pre-war Rolls-Royce or Bentley that still possesses its original wiring is in need of a rewire. We're just looking along the chassis here. There's also some rusted areas on the chassis. We don't anticipate that it's going to do much to the rust itself, but if it can get those areas, knock off the surface rust and whatever else, then it'll give better adhesion for the paint, because we are going to repaint those areas. So we got the rear axle, this area. The gas tank has been out and cleaned and painted. Even the leather gaiters on this car are in reasonably good shape, and I'm sure they're probably the original ones. It looks like somebody has done a little bit of relacing, and you do have some areas where they're a little ripped. This is a really well preserved, well cared for original car. It was the owner's father's, and he inherited it, and he just wants to keep it in this sort of condition, where it possesses all its nice originality, but it can still be used and enjoyed. You know, it drives along quite nicely, and not go overboard with restoration and all that type of thing. So again, we have the front gaiters. There's the chassis there. So it's going to be interesting to see how well it cleans up. I know it's going to improve it. How much of an improvement it'll be will be very interesting to see. Front axle. All right, we will be back in touch. I'm here at Leading Edge Autosport in Westchester, Pennsylvania with Ryan. And Ryan has just, and Dan had just gotten finished giving this Rolls-Royce Phantom 1 a really good CO2 blast cleaning on the underside. And I just wanted to show people about this process and the results that it has created. because it's really quite amazing. So this is the machine that does the CO2 blasting, and Ryan will tell us a little bit about it.
So this here is a cold jet PCS 60. This is just the machine that more or less takes the dry ice and allows us to use it for blasting with the combination of compressed air. So here we got the dry ice pellets. Take these, they're little 3mm rice pellets. Take these and load them into the machine up top. I more or less take the hose. I can control whatever pressure, size, particle I want on the screen, and then whatever I want to clean on the car, I can kind of adjust the settings to that particular part, dial it into how I want to clean it up perfectly, and then go about the rest of the car.
All right, thanks. So here are the results of the transmission and how it cleaned up. Now, if you look at the pictures before cleaning, you probably wouldn't even realize that that is an aluminum casing because it was so full of crud. So that really cleaned up super nicely, as well as the bell housing and all these areas. And I'll bring you around to some of the cleaning areas that they did under the bonnet. So yeah, so we take a look here at the engine. And all the crud and everything that's been cleaned off. So now we're looking at the underside, and we're going to start at the middle here with the transmission once again, and you can see just how well that stuff cleaned up, got all that grunge off of there. And you know, and some of the older guys say that that grunge is preservative, and you know, to a point they're right, but then after a while that preservative is so caked on there that the joint underneath doesn't have any lubrication and it's running dry. So you have all these linkages and all that, you know, they're due for an oiling, and you can clean all that gunk off, put a little oil in there, and then you know, you're doing a big favor for your car. So you can see everything is nicely cleaned up. And here's the side of the engine where you might remember this was probably a good inch of crud buildup that was on there. And then we'll pan back a little bit further. And there's the super robust rear axle that's virtually indestructible on these cars. You can see how well it's all cleaned up. You can see the details. So there are some areas where there's some exposed metal, and we'll go back over those and paint those in. And also, the blasting doesn't really affect rust a whole lot. It'll take off loose rust, it'll take off loose paint, but it's not going to take a whole lot of it off. I mean, you can dial it up maybe and do more of it, but basically we were just more interested in getting rid of the crud. And the nice thing about the CO2 blasting is that you're not forcing any grit or abrasive or any harmful product, any moisture or anything like that into these workings. Because if any of the CO2 did get in there, it's not going to have a corrosive effect, and it's just going to sort of evaporate out. So that's really the beauty of it. So we'll just take another little look on this side of the engine, and remember all the crud that was all built up on there. It's all cleaned off. So yeah. I also wanted to take the time to give Leading Edge a bit of a plug, and Ryan and Dan, because they really did a super job. They were very attentive. This is probably one of the only businesses in the world that actually does this. I'm sure there'll be more coming up in the future. But they're ahead of the curve and learning how to operate it and really be effective and careful, which is incredibly important, especially on a very important car like this.